Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I want to do a video somewhat quickly because I have a deadline. I have a meeting in a little bit. So actually somewhat quickly, talking about the reading plan that I have for this year. I was going to say talking about the books that I plan to read this year, but I'm actually not going to be talking about the individual books. I might mention some titles, but the point of this video for me is not just to list the books that I plan on reading this year, because at this point I know that a lot of them might be subject to change. I might not get to some, I might add others, the order in which I'm reading them might change, but more so what I want to do, even though I will be mentioning some titles just to give you an idea, more what I want to do here is talk about my plan, like the way that I'm trying to organize my reading this year. So a couple years ago, actually it was 2020, I had this goal in my mind of starting to read some of the earlier classic texts of authors who we would consider Wiccan. So like Gerald Gardner, Doreen Valiente, for sure, since I work at a museum that talks about witchcraft history and focuses on a lot of Wiccan elders type folks. But also, just for my own personal practice, I like to then look back at the history. I wanted to read some of those things that were kind of before my generation of witchcraft, as we might say, and get a sense of, what those earlier texts are, those things that we're always seeing referenced, but that I haven't actually read the source material, if you will. So that was my plan for 2020, but I didn't actually have any of those books. So it was a very vague plan, and I ended up going a totally different direction in 2020. And as you all know, if you've been watching my videos over the last few years, my entire reading ability changed in 2020. So I didn't do as much reading as I thought I would. I wasn't able to focus, and I just completely changed the direction I was going because I didn't actually have those books. So one of the things going into 2022 is that I have actually acquired some of those books in 2021. So for 2022, I wanted to bring in some of that stuff, but there's also some different subjects that throughout 2021 and maybe a little bit back into 2020 as well, if I think about that, but certainly throughout the last calendar year, I had started saying to myself, oh, this is a subject area that I want to delve more into. I want to get more into this. Maybe I'll do that next year after I finish some of these books that I currently have ongoing, right? Because I always have ongoing books. I did finish a lot of books that I was working on in December. I made a little post-it note for myself that was a bunch of things that I was reading at the time, and I was like, I would like to finish these before the end of the year. I thought that post-it note was still on this thing. Apparently it's not. It's on a page in my planner. I probably left it in December. I'm not going to go look for it right now. But anyway, it was like 6 or 7 things that I was currently reading in December that I wanted to try to finish by the end of December. And I finished all but one thing that was on that post-it note. Those were not all of the things that I currently had ongoing, mind you, so I still have a few things ongoing from the previous year that I'm working on wrapping up. I'm very close to the end of one, and a couple others I have purposely left for a while. But I am going into 2022 knowing that there were things that I wanted to start in 2021, but I just never did, and a lot of them fall under specific subject matter type topic categories. So what I've decided to try to do is put things into much more specific categories based on their subject matter than I have previously. And what I mean by that is, like over the last couple of years, I was trying to put a little bit more of a balance in my reading, but mostly what I was looking at was balancing witchy books with non-witchy books, or balancing all of my nonfiction books with making sure I put in a few fiction reads now and again. So that definitely helped. I did get a few more novels and fiction type things in 2021 read, but I want to do even more specifically. Not just witchy versus not witchy, not just fiction versus nonfiction, but make sure I'm really covering those subject areas that I wanted to get into. So one of them is that sort of like Wicca classics. That's the way I'm thinking of it. It might also just be witchcraft classics, it more broadly. It might also be neo-paganism classics more broadly. I don't know. But the things that I was starting with are very much Wicca classics, as we would call them now. Of course, it was just witchcraft at the time they were writing them, right? So, for example, some titles in that category for me that I do own now, because I've gotten them at secondhand stores in 2021. I was so happy to find some of these. So we're talking things like Gerald Gardner's Witchcraft Today and the Meaning of Witchcraft, Dorian Valiente's The Rebirth of Witchcraft, and Natural Magic. Those are 4 that I actually own now. I also picked up other secondhand copies of other texts that are in this category, like Stuart Farrer's What Witches Do, and a Raymond Buckland book that I did not already own, his Wicca for One. But those ones, for example, they're in the category for sure, but they're not currently on my list. I don't know like at what point I'm going to get around to reading those ones, but I'm focusing on the 2 Gardner and the 2 Valiente as being my category for now. Another category that I want to get into is more astrology stuff. I have always done very basic astrology research, like for basically since I was like 12, right? So I know very, very basics. I know how to look at a birth chart and figure out what is going on there. But as far as the interpretation of it goes, I only know very basics. So I have picked up a couple more astrology things over the last couple years, some of which are secondhand books. And one, at least, I recently purchased from the author. It is a signed copy. When I met Ivo Dominguez Jr. at the Buckland Museum this past December in 2021, I purchased a copy of his book, Practical Astrology for Witches and Pagans. And that is one of the books that I wanted to start 2022 with. And so I have started that book. I am a handful of chapters into it already, and my brain is already like, whoa, like I thought I knew basics, and there's just already so much more that I'm learning. So I'm very excited. I also picked up some other astrology related things over the last year, not just books, but other things. I'm being vague about that because maybe I'll do a different video about it in the future. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear me talk more about what I'm doing with going into astrology this year. I know some other people are doing more with astrology this year as well, so very fun. And another category that I've been wanting to get into as far as subject matter goes is Italian folk magic. So a lot of you know that part of my heritage is Italian. My mother's side, my grandmother, who I love so much, who is now on the other side of the veil, was born in Italy. And I didn't grow up with a whole ton of the pagan aspects of that because she was Roman Catholic. But that said, of course, there is still a lot of like folk magic that gets passed down even through, syncretized through other traditions and other religions. And so over the years, here and there, I have learned certain things that are Italian folk practices that I realized, oh, my family does that. Or my grandma had, this item around the house, but I never, it wasn't directly taught to me as like, here's the practice that goes along with it, but they're things that I've seen. Some of them are actual practices that I've witnessed like extended family members doing, but again, it was never taught to me. So it's something that I have never been able to study directly, was never taught to me per se, but that I want to explore. And I have acquired a few books that are Italian folk magic related. So the first one I'm starting with that I got secondhand from the museum gift shop, actually, either early last year or maybe even in 2020, I don't remember how long I've had it sitting here, is Raven Gramassi's Hereditary Witchcraft. So I have started reading that one already. I also have one of his books in audiobook form that I can listen to. That is his Italian Witchcraft. And I can't remember, I believe that's one of his books that had previously been published by another title, and now it's been changed. So I want to get into that one as well. And that reminded me that I also need to be looking at my list of audiobooks and ebooks. So I do have an ebook of the newer book called Italian Folk Magic. I don't remember the name of the author right now, but that is definitely on my list. So this is also why I'm like, I don't really want to talk about the specific book titles, because I'm remembering that I do have a bunch of ebooks and I have access to more ebooks and audiobooks too, as well as my physical books. So I need to kind of look back over everything and decide all of that. But I want to look at the categories that I want to hit throughout the year, put them into categories, and then kind of alternate between those categories. So for example, I don't want to just read 5 astrology books in a row and then read 3 or 4 Italian folk magic books in a row. And, I don't want to do that, because I did that sort of thing over the last couple of years. It felt like I was literally reading 3 different like witchcraft history books at one time, and I was just inundating my brain with basically different perspectives on the same information all at once. I have learned that I don't really want to do that. So what I want to do is, like, right now, I have started an astrology book and an Italian witchcraft book. Then I want to start one of the Wicca classics and maybe a newer witchcraft book that I've picked up recently, because I do want to be working in my friends' newer titles that I've purchased, like Phoenix LaFay's books or Thorn Mooney's books. Like, there are some newer things that I want to get to too, Keldon's books. So many things that are newer that I haven't gotten a chance to read too. So I want to make sure I'm like working it in. But then, so I'll go through these various categories. Some of them is also divination. I want to dive into learning the Lenormand system. I do have a somewhat beginner-friendly Lenormand deck and guidebook now. So that's one of the categories. But for example, I'll go through all those, and then I'll go back to the beginning, right? And then I'll pick another astrology book. And so I'm very excited about this method. It already feels much more doable. It feels like there is space here. It feels like there's room to change as I go and add things to different categories. And it also feels good in that it will be something different, every few weeks, depending on how long it takes me to read each book, knowing that I'm not just going to like finish one astrology book and pick up another astrology book and then pick up another astrology book, It feels like there's more space and there's more ease here. So I'm very excited about that. Now, I do have to jump into this other meeting that I said I have. It literally starts in a minute, so I've cut this very close. But that's my basic idea for how I'm trying to organize how I will decide on my reading this year. Let me know in the comments if you have reading plans for this year, if there are specific titles you want to get to, or just like subject areas that you're interested in diving into, or if you're not a big reader, just tell me what you're excited for in 2022. So thank you so much for watching and or listening to this video. I will see you next time. And until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.